like Tucker.
Hey,
wow,
Hannity.
That's horrible.
Hey, great show tonight. I'm packed here, so I'd love to chit chat, but we got to got to keep
you
the
have a
trains
big
running.
show. Have a great show. Laura Ingraham.
All right, Hannah Ty. Good evening. I'm Laura Ingraham, and this is the Ingraham Angle from Washington, D.C., of course. We have a riveting show for you tonight. Would you want anything different? President Trump has revoked former CIA Chief John Brennan's security clearance, and the media is in complete freak-out mode. Congressman Ron DeSantis joins us with a reaction. We also have an exclusive with Senator Lindsey Graham on his very provocative and somewhat, I think it's controversial idea on how to clean up the FBI. And Raymond Arroyo will be here with a Hollywood example of false Me Too allegations and some all too credible ones out of Pennsylvania. But first, the media versus Trump. That's the focus of tonight's angle. Remember when it was bad for local media to convey coordinated messages over the airwaves? You know, like when Sinclair Media asked local anchors at their stations to read the same promo script to describe their newscasts. They were derided by legacy media as Orwellian, Soviet-style propagandists who had created local Stepford wives. Oh, the outrage.
You get the idea there, what's going on. All these anchors and all these markets are required to read this script. It's attacking fake news.
If you are centralizing a political message to however many, more than 200 stations, I think it'll be if they get the FCC approval for this, to 200 stations, you have one of the great political messaging machines in the world.
So it was an abuse of the media for Sinclair to air these homogenized promos in local markets. But when the legacy media coordinate messages across local markets, it's apparently no problem at all. Tomorrow, over 350 papers organized by the Boston Globe will print coordinated editorials to denounce the president for his fake news comments and media trash talk. Sounds like one of the great political messaging machines in the entire world, if you ask me. Marjorie Pritchard of the Boston Globe told CNN, quote, "We have some big newspapers, but the majority are from smaller markets, all enthusiastic about standing up to Trump's assault on journalism." What we are witnessing is the full-on politicization of the media. As Steve Bannon once said, the media have become the opposition party, and that's a pity. I think it's ever since their disastrous misreading of the electorate in 2016, they have obsessively worked to prove themselves right. In other words, on just about every issue, they paint the most insidious portrait possible of the president in order that later on they can say, "See, we told you so, we were right." I think it's also utterly predictable. The better the economy gets, the more confident the American people are about their future, the more frantic the Never Trump press becomes. It's a perverse, inverse relationship. And I've noticed something else. The more popular Trump becomes among African Americans, his numbers are as high as 36%, according to Rasmussen, the more desperate the scribblers are to tar him as racist. And of course, they throw in xenophobic and misogynist for good measure. So rather than cover how American lives are being transformed due to a booming economy and record-breaking employment figures, the media focus on self-created controversies like fabricated dossier claims.
What was in the dossier was a spelled out, detailed allegation that there was a mutual operation underway here. That there was collaboration and coordination between the Trump campaign and the Russians.
A day that began with clips of James Comey, former FBI director, all over television telling ABC News that he cannot rule out that the infamous P tape mentioned in the Steele dossier is real.
Tell me the P tape or whatever the heck it is has credibility.
Listen, that is exactly what Mueller is looking at, one of the things, and so we'll find out.
False. And one of my personal faves that the media obsessed on, the breathless Melania is MIA speculation.
One thing that the president and the White House have been quite quiet about is Melania Trump and her status.
Staying behind at the White House, it seems, First Lady Melania Trump. The public hasn't seen her in 23 days, many wondering where she might be.
If the First Lady or the person who's standing in for First Lady disappears, you want to know where she is.
The First Lady was recovering from fairly serious surgery. By the way, a lot of these journalists take off 2 weeks for, a colonoscopy. And now we're caught up in the Omarosa obsession. That's wall-to-wall coverage of a woman lacking credibility, pushing specious claims, complete with surreptitiously recorded audio snippets.
Can you stand at the podium and guarantee the American people they'll never hear Donald Trump utter the N-word on a recording in any context?
We already know that this president seems immune from even the broadest standards of decency we've had in common in the past. Another tape wouldn't change anything.
People are at least prepared to believe a lot of the things that she's saying about him, and at least a couple of things have looked like they might be true based on some of these tapes.
A couple of things look like they might be true based on Omarosa's stream of charges have been refuted by nearly every party she quotes in her book. Frank Luntz, Katrina Pearson, and Lynn Patton, who is her closest confidant at the White House, was on our show last night. They all dispute her claims. And the president says the producer of The Apprentice, Mark Burnett, also denies that there's any tape. But still, the media happily gives Omarosa hours and hours and hours of airtime. I think in their warped thinking, the woman America considers to be the ultimate mean girl helps advance the narrative for the media that Trump's a racist. But once again, I think the media are misreading the American people. Here's the latest data. According to an NPR PBS NewsHour Marist poll, that's a mouthful, 71% of Americans have not very much or no confidence at all in the media, compared to just 25% who have a great deal of confidence, or quite a lot. But the amazing thing is, the media don't seem to care about what the consumers of news are shouting at them. So if the ratings and readership are down, whatever. We have a mission, that's to get Trump. Most have completely abandoned the idea of objectivity and are now essentially operating as full-time members of the resistance. So now that we've established all that, what lessons can the White House take from all of this? I realize it's tempting to swing at every pitch. But let's be real here. As Trump proved in the election, the media just aren't that influential anymore. So the president needn't feel like he has to respond to their every utterance, regardless of how vicious it is. Combine the media's waning irrelevance with the Democrats' invisible agenda, and the president, I think, has a pretty sweet opportunity to actually expand his base before November. Now, I know a lot of people are shaking their head. How can that be? Now, I know he'll be on the stump in critical races before November, but I think he should also take the time to visit places that Republicans have often ignored. Mr. President, your agenda is working, so sell it everywhere. And listen to the people who are being fed a load of malarkey about what's in your heart and mind, and show them what's really in your heart and mind. And yes, that means doing events exclusively for African Americans and Latinos, including in distressed communities, places like Chicago, where Democratic leaders have failed abysmally. Show them a better alternative and celebrate the gains you've already won for them and all Americans. Too many Republicans never understand that you often win respect for just showing up. But of course, don't expect the editorial writers to give you any credit for any outreach like that. But in a way, who cares? No one's reading them anyways. And that's the angle. Joining me now for reaction is Dave Bossie, a Fox News contributor who served as deputy manager of Trump's campaign, and Richard Goodstein, a former advisor to Bill and Hillary Clinton. Richard.
Well, where do you want to start first? The media or Omarosa? Let me talk about Omarosa for a second. You'd like to think Trump said, I'm going to hire the best people. Those are people who be experienced, have great ideas, really work hard, and work for the American people. Instead, what he revealed was the people that he keeps on are people who say good things about him, who he later refers to as dogs and lowlifes. And the problem with that is, what does that say to foreign leaders? People, he doesn't just talk in a vacuum. People actually are kind of watching what he's saying, and it just kind of, and that Michael Cohen, Omarosa, God knows who else, are taping conversations with Trump. What does that say about the kind of relationships that even his closest advisors have towards him and what trust they have in him. That's the problem. It's not what's on the tapes. It's what his reaction to the tapes say about him.
What do you think Susan Rice's performance on all those Sunday shows after Benghazi, what did that say to foreign
I'll tell you exactly what it said.
She would go out and lie for this administration. You want to talk about qualified people?
Yeah, I will.
Spying on Americans and unmasking people. You want to talk about qualified? She should never have been promoted to the UN after she went out and lied to the American public. She was not qualified, or she was lying.
Let me answer your question.
Omarosa should never have been hired.
She said exactly what the intelligence community said. If she had deviated from it, then you would have had her head for good reason.
She was deviating from it. A goofy video causes a Benghazi attack. It's ridiculous. Terrorism, everybody knew it was terrorism.
Look, yeah, Obama had his share of bad folks working in his White House. Omarosa's big question for me, the big question about Omarosa is not just what she has on tape that she's released, but what she has that she hasn't released. And I think that I would call for a congressional investigation into how she did this. Did she use her personal phone? Did she use a White House phone? Was it secure, not secure? Were there enemies of this country who had access or could gain access to those recordings? This is a very dangerous precedent to be recording inside the Situation Room in the White House. And Congress's oversight, in my opinion, this is a must-do investigation.
She should never have been hired.
It's rare. I agree.
Well, of course.
I agree with David 100%.
No, you're right. She never should have been hired.
Those are presidential records, incidentally. Did she respond to a subpoena that was given to the White House? It's interesting. Those are presidential records, her tapes. We'll see whether they get revealed.
Politico reviewed the tapes, and they said the tapes she provided, and it's like, well, they're kind of juicy. Nothing about the president or his family. I mean, so it's like she was out there like, I'm Omarosa, I'm going to tape you. Like, I never trust people who tape conversations secretly or who write memos to the file. Jim Comey, Omarosa, end of story.
They're
memos to the file. Let's talk about Brennan, because everyone's hot and bothered about Brennan. And Richard, this is what Brennan said today about what Trump could be trying to do with the Russians at the Russians' behest. Let's watch.
I am very concerned about the principle here. I'm very concerned about what this might portend in terms of the revocation of other clearances. And this is something that I believe that the press needs to shine a very bright spotlight on to make sure that this abuse, and that's what I consider it, an abuse of power by Mr. Trump, does not go without a very close review and challenge.
Yeah, so he mentioned about the Russians. That was not the bite, but so he's talking about the security clearance there.
Right.
Trump has the unilateral authority to revoke a security clearance, right?
Right. He does. And do I think John Brennan is going to be compromised in whatever he does in his life from this point on by not having a security clearance?
No, it doesn't matter.
I mean, he worked for presidents of both parties for decades. He was a resource that he's now not going to be able to give to the United States. The problem with pulling a security clearance is he's basically saying, you talk against me and you're going to get your First Amendment rights to free speech and free press. That's what all this, that's what you talked about in your opening segment.
There are plenty of folks out in this country who are critical of this president that the president doesn't have a problem with about whatever they say. But you can't be the leader of the resistance movement, the group of Americans that hate this country and this president, and still hold a security clearance.
Well,
you cannot do that today.
You can if you know what he knows about what the threats are from abroad. He's scared to death because of
this. This guy is a political hack. He's nothing more or less. He's a political hack who should be chairman of the DNC, not a
how can you tell the difference between like John Brennan and any host on MSNBC? So Nicole Wallace had him on today, and she asked him, like, do you think that Trump could be beholden to a third party other than the American people? And he's like, well, could be the Russians, but I don't know, and I don't know what Mueller. He was like saying, I don't know, and it was just it was the most rank speculation from a former CIA chief. It's just wrong.
Because actually,
it is wrong.
I think he knows a lot more than we know.
No, he doesn't. Listen to what Nicole Wallace tried to get him to say. And he's like, in the end, he's like, well, it could be, but I don't know of anything, but Mueller's looking into it. He had a big nothing. And I'm telling you, it was hilarious. I was watching it with the producers like, what the heck did he just say? It didn't make any sense. But he's like a pundit. That's fine. He can do that. But I think the CIA
but you don't need a
greatly.
Security clearance to be a pundit.
Listen, I just think, you know what I think, aside from Brennan, all these security clearances should be temporary. They should be never-ending security
clearances. Peter Strzok still has his security clearance. The president needs to go down.
Peter Strzok still has his whole security clearance?
Right. That's what I understand. So look, we need the president needs to go down that long list of folks who are out there across this country leading the resistance movement as enemy. In my opinion, what they have done is damage this country's national security.
Yeah, and my answer to that is you've got people like Omarosa filling the federal government. You've got people like John Brennan who have worked for decades in the intelligence
for a communist.
For multiple presidents.
Voted for a communist.
He worked for Bush. He worked for Reagan. Come on.
Yeah, during 9/11.
Okay, and my point is that he's a resource. If you want to say you're cut loose, that's a price that the country pays. It's not a price that he's paying. Sorry.
No, I mean,
we're grateful for his service, and I'm glad he's gone.
I think he should. Everyone should have to reapply for security clearances. Why should it be like a never-ending security clearance? It's just a total scam.
And I'm glad the president stood up for the process of our national security today and took it.
He should go down the whole list, and it's not an enemies list. It's people who you've moved on to something else. That's fine.
The problem is it looks like an enemies list. The way he's going about it. Michael Flynn, I think, still has security clearance, right? He has confessed to a felony.
When you are the leader of the resistance movement in this country, people in the streets being violent and burning down buildings. This is
love
outrageous.
Brennan. You got to believe the Antifa people. For now, they don't like Brennan, but for now, he's an enemy of my enemy is my friend. Right. So Antifa in Brennan.
If you're going after Flynn, strip Flynn, then his skirts are clean.
Okay,
but he
can't. Flynn's. I don't care.
Fine, exactly. But the fact that he can't do that shows that it isn't.
It's not that he can't do it. He did one today. Don't say he can't do it.
All right, don't tease us. We got to get more. We still have a few more days in the week. Guys, thanks so much. And the intelligence community is generally apolitical, as we said, but Brennan has been one of the president's harshest critics, regularly making appearances, media sounding more like a far-left pundit, of course, than a former spy chief. Joining me now, someone's been very critical of Brennan, Congressman Ron DeSantis, the Republican nominee in Florida's gubernatorial election. Congressman, is this fair to revoke a security clearance? I mean, John Brennan, the list of jobs, Congressman, he's had for the government, and he's just trying to protect the United States, don't you see, from perpetual Russian interference, from the puppet known as our current president. I mean, that's basically what he said today.
Oh, of course. He's just this great public servant. Please. First of all, he shouldn't have a security clearance, even if he did do a good job and even if he had been apolitical. But his conduct, I think, has been a joke. I think it's damaged the intelligence community. And his tenure as both the national terrorism chief, but then also at CIA, was very unproductive and disastrous. He did not do a good job identifying ISIS as a rising threat, and of course was somebody helping to facilitate the disastrous deal with Iran. So his performance wasn't good. So I don't think he would be a guy you would even want to get advice from, even if he wasn't such a partisan hack. But the fact that he launches those wild accusations on Twitter, it's just not conduct becoming of somebody who's been in those high positions.
Well, I have to say a short while ago, this was on CNN, Anderson Cooper interviewed Michael Hayden about all of this, and he had this to say about Brennan's effectiveness.
It was personal, and it was vindictive, and frankly, I think it was an overall judgment that John was being somewhat effective. The White House just messaged the entire American intelligence community. If you stand up and say things that upset the president or with which he disagrees, he will punish you.
I first thought he was in a prison there. They actually sent a camera crew to Dulles Airport. He's like on the way to vacation. That's how important it was for CNN to get him. But he said it's a sign that he was being somewhat effective. At what? Undermining the president? What the heck is he effective at? He lied to Dianne Feinstein. The CIA spied on a Senate committee, the computers of a Senate committee. He lied about it. He shouldn't have a security clearance just for that fact. Where's Dianne Feinstein when you need her help? Go ahead.
I know. And the thing is, this idea that the intelligence community, you're sending a message to them, it's not the role of the intelligence community, particularly people who are active now, to be launching political attacks. They're supposed to be, many of them are professional, but the idea that you're an activist as an intelligence official, that is not the type of intelligence that we want. We want people who are apolitical, and obviously we've seen in the whole fallout of this Russia thing, when you have people like Brennan, when you have people like Peter Strzok, when you have people like Andrew McCabe who are behaving politically, that really distorts some of the powers, the use of some of the powers that the government has.
Congressman, on a separate issue, today Governor Andrew Cuomo from New York made a comment that made me stop in my tracks. And it's part of the Democrats, I think, desire to turn out the vote, get people registered. Oh my gosh, you gotta. And they're freaking out, I think, because they see the economy riding so high, and they still have to create a sense of panic. But this is what he said. Let's watch.
We're not going to make America great again. It was never that great. We have not reached greatness. We will reach greatness when every American is fully engaged.
The president just tweeted out, can you believe that this is the governor of the highest tax state in the United States, Andrew Cuomo, having a total meltdown? He just literally tweeted that. Your reaction to that? He kind of tried to clarify, I guess, apologize. He apologized. The Congressman, your reaction, really quick.
Well, it's just absurd. I mean, you know, some of the great things that the United States has done, we've done things that no other country's done. I think the country's a great country. I think we're on the right track now, more so than we were the last 8 years. New York is on the wrong track, and people are fleeing his state because of his bad policies.
Congressman, thanks so much. And the FBI investigated Hillary Clinton and President Trump's campaign. But who's going to investigate the FBI? Republican Senator Lindsey Graham has a bold idea. He joins us next with details. The White House isn't alone in its campaign to bring accountability to bad actors within the FBI and the intel community. And now key members of the Senate are ramping up their own efforts to do so. Fox News correspondent Kristen Fisher is here on that, but she begins with more detail on the Brennan affair today. Kristen.
Hey, Laura, well, President Trump has been threatening to do this for weeks, but I think few thought that he would actually do it. Even House Speaker Paul Ryan had initially dismissed this as him trolling people. But today he did it. President Trump revoked the security clearance of former CIA Director John Brennan. Now, Democrats, they have been using words like Nixonian, illegal, a gross abuse of power. But the White House press secretary says the president is well within his constitutional authority to do it.
Mr. Brennan has recently leveraged his status as a former high-ranking official with access to highly sensitive information to make a series of unfounded and outrageous allegations, wild outbursts on the internet and television about this administration.
And this may be only the beginning. The White House says it is considering taking similar action against people like James Comey and Susan Rice. So here you have the White House potentially going after the security clearances of several former top national security and law enforcement officials. At the same time, you have Republican Senator Lindsey Graham urging action against the entire Justice Department. He wants a special counsel to investigate why a DOJ official, Bruce Orr, was allowed to investigate then-candidate Trump, while Orr's wife worked for the opposition research firm that produced that now infamous dossier.
These investigations against Trump were corrupt to the core. They gave Clinton a pass. Bruce Orr was at least unethical. We need a special counsel to look at all things Department of Justice and FBI when it came to the Trump investigation, particularly the counterintelligence investigation.
And I should mention that Bruce Orr was one of the people that the White House press secretary said was on the list of people that they're considering to potentially revoke a security clearance. Laura?
Kristen, thanks so much. And lo and behold, here, you see him on the tape, and you see him here, Lindsey Graham.
But I agree with every word.
I'm like, I don't know about that guy on the tape, but we got him here. Go. So tell us about Brennan. I mean, you on board with this idea? I think you were one of the people who also thought it was a pretty good idea.
Well, here's what I think. You can be the former CIA director and a critic of the president. You just can't lead the resistance movement at the same time. If you look at CIA policy about how a former director should act, he is well over the line.
Yeah, well, they
have actually a policy about this.
Yeah, well, he had a history of lying of the Senate investigation. What he about what he did with the Senate staff is they were spying on the computers. The Senate lied about it, and Dianne Feinstein found out about it.
Why would this administration share anything with him as much as he hates them? He really thinks Trump is worse than every enemy we have. So I just think the way he's carried himself hurts the intelligence community.
Let's talk about your idea for a special counsel to investigate the Justice Department. How would that work, and what are your grounds?
Well, number one, I'm tired of getting on TV telling you all the bad things. I want somebody who's not a politician. Let's put the shoe on the other foot. What do you think Democrats would be saying if a Republican, if the RNC hired a former British agent to go to Russia to get dirt on Clinton? Do you think they'd be wanting to look at whether or not there was a crime if a FISA warrant was issued based on a document prepared by a foreign agent that's a bunch of political garbage? So I'm tired of telling everybody in the country how bad this is. Have somebody to do for the FBI and the FISA warrant process what Mueller is doing for Trump.
What would it entail, and who would be subject to this review within? You can't investigate the whole FBI, but there's a core within the FBI. Bruce Orr, the fact, does he still have a security clearance? I mean, I guess he does, because they're considering
email investigation was a joke.
From the beginning?
They were in the tank. They had a bias against Trump and for Clinton, and if you had done what she had done, we would not be talking
Would you
here.
Still be a member of the JAG Corps?
I would be court-martialed.
Right.
There are people sitting in jail doing far less than her. So I want somebody to look at how the Clinton email investigation was conducted, why it was dismissed, and the FISA warrant. Every American should be concerned about the rule of law, and I think the FISA warrant process here was horribly abused, and maybe in a criminal fashion.
Could the judges who were sitting in reviewing that application for the search warrant, for the wiretap of Carter Page, is there any process within the FISA courts to review that again? I mean, if I were the judge and they didn't tell me that the opposition candidate, not just an opposition, but the candidate paid for that dossier, which was a critical part, if not the most critical part.
So there's a footnote in there that's a reference that this guy may have political motives. They never told the court the truth, that he was on the payroll of the DNC.
But what about that judge? What about the judges who...
I would be really upset.
But couldn't... I guess there's no way to go back and unwiretap somebody, but there should be like sanctions. I mean, there should be an ability to issue sanctions against the Justice Department officials who signed off on this.
Somebody has to watch those who watch us. And Mr. Horowitz is a good guy, but he doesn't have the power of a prosecutor. The corruption at the Department of Justice and the FBI regarding the Clinton email investigation, the early stages of the Trump-Russia investigation were corrupt to the core. And I think somebody needs to look at it outside of politics. Especially if Mr. Rosenstein's watching, what more has to happen for you to be convinced that somebody outside your organization needs to look to make sure that we clean up the mess?
James Clapper tonight said, our discussion of this, the constant criticism of FBI and Intel, is undermining those hallowed institutions. Let's watch.
But I spent a good part of my life, 50 plus years, 34 of it in the military, defending this country and its values and standards and institutions, which I feel, as do the others involved here, are under serious assault. And this is going to get worse before it gets better, I predict.
So it's Trump's fault or Republicans' fault for questioning how this whole investigation, how the special counsel was appointed, Comey set up with the whole thing. I mean, you can't question. If you question it, you're undermining the authority or integrity of the... what about the integrity undermined by them?
What bothers me is not one Democrat seems to be concerned that the people in charge of the Clinton email investigation clearly were in the tank for Clinton and hated Trump. Nobody seems to be concerned that a political document prepared by a political party using a foreign agent to go to a foreign country to get information on a political candidate was used to get a warrant. Nobody seems to be concerned about it. I've been in the military 33 years. I love the FBI. I'm very concerned about what I've seen.
Senator, birth tourism in the United States, birthright citizenship. The president hasn't talked all that much about that. He did on the campaign.
Yeah, you should.
It's become a huge problem in this country. Ads in Russia, in China. Sure. We'll get you a U.S. passport. Come here, have a baby. We'll put you up. We'll find you a doctor. We'll get your passport made for your baby. Bingo. It's done. How does this get turned around?
Well, I think you need to change the laws. I mean, if you go to France and have a child, you're not a French citizen, but people abuse our laws. They actually get tourist visas close to the delivery date. They come to a resort with a maternity ward just to have the child in America.
Well, we want to have you. We want to have you back to get into that further, because I think it is a massive, massive scandal. Thank you so much, Senator Graham. And the PC mob is tearing apart a new TV show's title, while the Catholic Church under fire after a damning, horrific report on abuse in Pennsylvania. That in our Seen and Unseen segment with Raymond Arroyo next. Time now for our Seen and Unseen segment, where we expose what's behind the big cultural stories of the day. First, a new show on Bravo has the PC crowd so worked up They're about to smash their screens in rage, I'll tell you. For more, we're joined by Fox News contributor, New York Times bestselling author of the Will Wilder series, Raymond Arroyo. Tell us about this new Jerry O'Connell talk show. Why is the title so offensive?
Well, Jerry O'Connell, the film star, is a fan of Bravo's programming. This is a ploy to get men to watch Bravo.
Oh, wait, what, does he have a show on Bravo?
He's going to have a show.
Oh.
It's called Real Men Watch Bravo, except there was a huge reaction to that. They said the title is misogynistic, homophobic. I don't quite understand how it's homophobic, but nonetheless, Jerry O'Connell and the producers of the show decided we're changing the title, and Jerry came out to explain why.
We changed the title of the show. It's no longer the aforementioned title. It's now called Bravo's Play-by-Play, and it's basically a panel of three of us, and we sort of break down everything that happened that week on Bravo. It's sort of like a sports center for Bravo highlights. Like Bravo, and it saved my marriage with my wife. It's our passion. It's what we talk about.
I have news for Jerry. Men, real or otherwise, are not going to watch the Shaws of Sunset or the Beverly Hills Housewives. We're not interested in that. If it hunts or there's a ball being thrown, we'll watch.
That's misogynistic, Raymond.
No, it's not misogynistic. It's just,
the thing is,
men like some programming, women like other things.
I've met Jerry O'Connell. He's a really nice guy.
Okay, but you can't take women's programming. It's like trying to get men to watch Hallmark.
What's Lifetime? On Lifetime TV, on Lifetime TV, there's always a woman pushing a man down the stairs or vice versa. Someone's always getting pushed down the stairs.
And men aren't watching that either.
No, they don't like to watch it. Real men don't watch Bravo.
I've got to get to this other thing. You'll remember earlier this summer, we talked about Chris Hardwick. He's the host of AMC's Talking Dead. Now, he was removed from that show and his other talk show pulled from the schedule because of abuse allegations made against him by a former girlfriend. AMC did a thorough review. This week, they returned him from the metaphorical dead to host Talking Dead, and it was an emotional return. Watch this.
And I want to thank you, the Walking Dead community, for all of your support these last couple of months. You know, the show is not just a job to me. This is a vital part of my life, you know, and this has been a sanctuary. These last 7 years we've been here. This has been with me through good times and bad times, and I have so much gratitude to you, the fans. And I've said the following words a million times, countless times, and yet I have never been more thankful than I am in this very moment to say to you that I am Chris Hardwick, and this is Talking Dead.
What you are seeing here is a man who saw his career flash before his eyes. This was handled in the right way. They did dismiss him from the show. They pulled the show from the schedule, but after a quick investigation, they returned him back.
Not everybody who's accused.
The allegations were not true.
Not everybody who's accused is guilty. That's the problem with some of these 20-year-old allegations. Some of them are.
Well, and the Me Too rush to judgment I worry about because you have guys like this who are innocent.
I confess I've never heard of him in my life. I don't even recognize him. I have no idea who he is.
Now you have.
By the way, from false allegation of abuse to some all too real ones. Raymond, you've covered the Vatican for decades now. Tell us about this grand jury report in Pennsylvania. This is devastating for the Catholic Church. You and I are both Catholics, truth be told.
Well, we'll put up this graphic. I mean, we're talking about 300, what the grand jury calls predator priests exposed in this report. Over 1,000 child victims. Now, these cases span 70 years, remember, from 1947 to the present.
So how is it all coming out now?
Well, it's coming out now because the grand jury was charged with looking at all the denominations in Pennsylvania and doing a report and an investigation of it. They decided to focus only on the Catholic Church, which I don't quite understand, because when you look across denominations, there's kind of an equal
and public schools. Public schools have a lot of abuse.
The Protestant church, others.
Locker rooms.
But let's put that aside for a minute. This shows heinous disregard for victims, a callousness toward what these people were going through. They covered up these offenses. They hid them. They reassigned, putting more kids in danger. This is unconscionable. Cardinal Wuerl is mentioned in this. He was the Bishop of Pittsburgh. He was interviewed this past week about his predecessor, Cardinal McCarrick. And they asked him, is this a crisis in the church? Let's listen to what he said.
I don't think this is some massive crisis. It was a terrible disappointment, and we're
all of us. For you, for me, he was a friend to us.
So we're saying now, well, what do we do in the future to see there's a mechanism so if somebody wants to say something about a bishop, they have a place to go?
Let me ask another question. I think something that's emerging from all of this is the care of bishops for bishops. And I think that's something that has to be addressed, is how bishops can care for their brother bishops, cardinals for their brother cardinals.
That's Father Tom Rosica. He is a Vatican consultant on communications, worrying about bishops to bishops. What about the victims? Here's what needs to happen, Laura. We need an independent, lay-run forensic audit, a financial audit of every diocese in the United States and maybe the world. And then you need a lay panel empowered by the Vatican of prosecutors, independent prosecutors, with canonical officials, cardinals, to investigate every diocese. They should make canonical referrals as well as criminal referrals. The only way to clean house.
Every last bishop and cardinal who knew about this and transferred people.
Or were part of it.
I don't understand why this Cardinal Mahoney is still rolling around the West Coast. I mean, there's a lot of people out there who, I'm telling you something.
There are a lot of questions that need to be asked, and Catholics are looking for blood. And they caused this.
We're all saying, oh, this is not a... What?
No,
what are you talking about? We got to tell her. We got to explain this to our children, and this got to get cleaned up. I am livid about this.
This is as bad as I've seen it in 20 years, and Catholics want answers.
Raymond, thank you. And one of America's most celebrated black athletes is now comparing the national anthem, get this, to songs of slavery? Details after this. When the opportunity strikes, the left and their celebrity brethren are happy to tarnish American symbols and American history in any way they can. Case in point, NBA champion star Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who's now comparing the U.S. national anthem to songs of slavery. In a new column for The Hollywood Reporter, he writes, quote, "To the slave owners, singing slaves would drown out their own cruelty and oppression, clothe them in a coerced choir of decency. But it wasn't enough that the slaves had to sing. They had to sing their oppressors' feel-good songs. Currently, the song being demanded is the national anthem during football games." Joining me now with reaction, Project 21 co-chair Horace Cooper, along with criminal defense attorney Anthony Tall. Great to see both of you. Let's start with you, Anthony. Help me with the connection here. I'm having trouble making the connection from the national anthem to the songs of slavery.
Well, what he's saying is that generally African Americans during slavery had to sing songs, you know, to kind of show that they're happy during although they were oppressed and they were doing horrible labor jobs and forced labor. They were doing forced labor. So what he's saying is he's comparing the national anthem with,
I get that.
you know, with
Anthony, I get what he's doing. You're just restating what he says. My point is, NFL players are playing my favorite game. I love football. And they're getting paid fairly well, some cases millions of dollars, and they love the game. So they're not being oppressed. And I know there's social justice cause, I get that. But slavery and football, it just, I mean, even if you love the celebrities and you like I get that. But sometimes the left goes overboard, and the right does it too. But you lose people by going there, and I think it's sad because Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, an incredible athlete, an incredible person, but I just think you lose people with making those jumps. But go ahead.
But I don't think he's going too far. I don't think he's going too far. I think all he's saying is that he's just comparing, you know, you have a league where you have like 99% white owners, and then you have the president demanding that they stand up. Regardless of how much money you make, if you feel as if you're being forced to do something that is reminding you of an oppressive past.
You don't have to play. Horace, get in on this. You don't have to play football. No one's making them play football. Leave the game if you don't like what your owners and your coaches are asking you. The coaches make them run suicides every day. They don't want to do that half the time either. No one, I mean, I used to be in college sports. I didn't want to run suicides.
They don't mind doing that.
Well, you know, you have to do, I mean, there are rules. They sign a contract. Horace, go ahead.
Okay.
Okay, the 1%ers sitting out there on the field want us to believe that their experience is the same as people who were held captive, kidnapped, brought to work, and forced and not allowed to have any freedom. That's the same. That when we honor our country with the national anthem, it's the same as when 1%ers who are paid by the 0.0001% ask them not to offend the audience, that's somehow in any way akin to slavery. What you do is you lose people. You make sure that the public doesn't watch football and that people don't join this particular crusade.
Horace, what are you talking about? Did you just hear LeBron James the other day say it doesn't matter how much money you have or who you are? When you're black in America, there's a feeling of being reminded that you're black. There's a feeling of being reminded of your history.
Ridiculous.
So don't give me that. Don't give me this about this 1%.
Ridiculous.
Don't give me this about this 1%. Horace.
Because they are the 1%.
You're not listening to me. Listen to me.
They are the 1%.
It doesn't matter if they're the 1%. If they can't walk down the street and feel dignified, it doesn't matter how much money you have.
Okay, there are Americans. There are Americans, black, white, and brown, who suffer and who are deprived and who do without. And those people aren't getting any of the attention. It's not
Well, guys, hold on. Let me get you guys. Hold on. No one can hear either of you, so you're both making interesting points, but no one can hear either of you. I have to ask one question though. The piece, which is well written as a column, I might not agree with it, but it's very well crafted. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar mentions Frederick Douglass, of course, who's one of my absolute favorite historical figures. And he mentions him, but then Frederick Douglass is the same person who frequently played the Star-Spangled Banner on his violin for his family. So, he frequently played it on his violin for his grandchildren in the years after the war. He said in an 1871 speech at Arlington Cemetery, if the Star-Spangled Banner floats only over free American citizens in every quarter of the land, and our country has before it a long and glorious career of justice, liberty, and civilization, we are indebted to the unselfish devotion of the noble army. I think using Frederick Douglass in this column is kind of misplaced, but go ahead.
No, Laura, because this isn't a zero-sum game. You can be of any race in America. That's the beauty of America. And there's sometimes where you can feel ashamed to sing the song. There's sometimes when black people are getting shot down on the streets that you don't feel as if, I'm talking about getting shot down by police, that you don't feel like that national anthem has risen to its standards. Now, obviously, during the civil rights movement, when there's certain legislation that was passed, that we lived up to our Constitution. Those were great times that we wanted to sing the national anthem.
Alveda King, we talked to today and said, and she couldn't join us tonight, but Alveda said, look, her uncle was extremely patriotic. And in all the marches, you see the American flag is always there. He always insisted that it be there. That was her point today. Horace.
Laura.
I agree.
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and these multi-millionaire coddled individuals that rather than using their time constructively, let me finish, rather than using their time constructively to pursue whatever social justice causes they want, have decided that they hate this country so much that they will offend it when the national anthem is played. That will lose. Laura. That is not going to persuade.
Yeah, I don't think they hate. I don't think they hate the. I really don't think they hate.
He's not saying that.
I don't think it comes across well to people. I don't think they hate the country. I think they're really got it in their minds that the police are unfair to African Americans.
If you slap your spouse, slap your spouse and you say I love them, people doubt you. When the national anthem is being played,
we're way over.
You act this way.
Yeah, I think it would be nice if everyone stood for the anthem and have a debate off the field. I think that's always better. But great segment. Christian Baker, by the way, is now the target of a political vendetta. How the legal profession is being weaponized against Christian Americans. Next.